Test recording. Awesome. Hey, Stanford girls, this is Ashley. I'm here today with MaryBeth Evans. She's going to introduce herself, tell us a little bit about her career in finance. And I think this is our first time actually having a CPA and CIA. So she'll explain what those words mean much better than I can ever. So yeah, I'll hand it over to you, MaryBeth.
Okay, I'll give a little introduction, then I can start the presentation. But as you mentioned, my name is MaryBeth Evans. So the position I currently hold is called the Senior Manager of Internal Audit, and I work at Newfoundland Power. So hopefully that company is very familiar with most of you if you're here in Newfoundland. But I'm 36 years old. I grew up here in St. John's. My husband, he's British. His name is John. And we have two wonderful children. So I have a 4-year-old named Tessa and a 2-year-old who causes a lot of havoc, but his name is Thomas. So I'll get into a little bit more detail later, but from an education perspective, I completed my Bachelor of Commerce co-op at Memorial University. I then went on to complete what was called a Chartered Accountant's designation. So that's now called a Chartered Professional Accountants. There was a merging of some of the main accounting streams a couple of years ago, so our titles have changed, but they really are the same thing now. And as you mentioned, I also recently obtained what's called a CIA, which sounds really fun because everyone thinks it's that US, investigation side of it. But in my world, it's still fun. But it's called a Certified Internal Auditor. And I'll get into a little bit more detail later. So I spent most of my career working for an accounting firm called Deloitte. And since leaving Deloitte, I had worked for a company called Fortis Inc. here in St. John's, and now Newfoundland Power. So Newfoundland Power is a subsidiary of Fortis, which means that Fortis completely owns Newfoundland Power. So it's basically like an internal move between the companies. From a skill set, I know you guys wanted me to mention kind of what skills got me to where I was today. From my perspective, it's my analytical skills. I'm very organized. I've been organized since I was probably 2 years old. Leadership skills and confidence. And I don't mean to sound like I'm confident all the time. What I mean is just, when I do my work and I present and things like that, it's just trusting the skills that I've learned over the years, right? So that's all I mean by confidence. It's not to come across as conceited by any stretch. So I do have a presentation, and it largely is pictures because I feel like that's more entertaining than my face and the snowstorm outside. So let me share. I guess this should, yeah, let's see. You tell me. Is that still okay?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay. All right, and I can't take credit for that picture because it's beautiful, but that's the Newfoundland Power truck. So what I thought I would do today is give a high level of my journey of where I got to. So as I said, I'm 36 years old. So, half of my life I'll probably walk through. So about the age of 15, 18 of around high school, and how I kind of got to where I am today. I believe that's where most of you are in either junior high or high school. So hopefully it's quite relevant. So this is me in high school, and I was trying to pull pictures, and I realized that I was in high school before Facebook was around, and you don't realize how hard it is to find pictures when Facebook isn't around. So I was quite pleased actually that I found a few, but I was the type of student that was involved in anything that I could, probably similar to you guys if you're a part of this call right now. I attended high school at Gonzaga High School here in St. John's, and I was part of various groups like school council, band, drama. There's a picture there where I did an international exchange in Cuba. So basically any kind of extracurricular activities I was involved in, that's what I like to do in high school. By far, my favorite subjects were math and science. So my brain is very logical. I'm very in the box type of thinker. Mathematics is, that's my strength, right? So I liked math, I liked physics, I liked chemistry. I definitely did not like language. I attempted to take French and Spanish, and I regret it significantly. And I Definitely did not read all the novels they told me. I'm not saying to do that, but it just wasn't my forte. I joke around that I read more Coles Notes than I did novels. I definitely got by and I did well in those classes, but they weren't the classes that I actually truly loved. So instead, I went on, I did AP Math, AP Chemistry, and those were more the fortes, right? That logic side. So I always knew that numbers and things like that is what I loved. My mom jokes around that I've always loved numbers. So, when you're a kid, she said I would kick up a fuss if anybody else was the banker in Monopoly. And she also jokes around that in kindergarten, we had to do a poster and you had to say what you wanted to do and different things. And one of the boxes was what you wanted to be when you grew up. And I drew a person at a bank. So, I thought counting money and taking other people's money was like the ideal job for me. Obviously, that morphed into what I'm doing now. But the idea being is I love that area of work when even at a really young age. So, I was always a good student in school. And when looking at universities, I did apply for ones outside of Newfoundland. I was interested in traveling, trying something new, but eventually I did choose Memorial. That was, I only live essentially around the corner from MUN. And I'm really glad I chose that one. So I went on and I did my Bachelor of Commerce co-op stream at Memorial. And right away, I knew I wanted to focus in accounting. So if that is anything that anybody is interested in, from an accounting perspective, if you want to enter the CPA program, there are minimum courses that you have to do in university. So it's important to know that kind of by your second or third year, and then all your elective business courses are focused in accounting. All of my extra electives I chose were math. Looking back, I definitely wish I had chosen easier courses, but again, I enjoyed it and it worked for me at the time. So my parents taught me pretty early that I needed to earn money. I worked summer jobs as a tennis instructor, and starting in high school, I worked at a retail store that probably nobody knows here, but called Smart Set. It's a sister company of Reitman's, but it was everywhere in the city, but it has since closed down. I continued to work part-time during university, which is important to ensure, I was able to be disciplined. I got my clothes 50% off, which as a, late teen, early 20-year-old woman, that was basically, jackpot. And I also then got to have some extra money to enjoy life outside of school. It took me definitely a little while to get into my groove at university. I'd go to classes, I'd study, I worked my part-time job, and I enjoyed the weekends with my friends. It was the year we're all turning 19. So, you guys will imagine that in a couple of years, there's definitely a lot of fun things to do. I never really got involved in any of the extracurricular activities until my second year. So the way the Bachelor of Commerce program works, if you're not familiar, is that you do 2 standard years of a fall and a winter semester, and then you get those first 2 summers off. And then after your first 2 summers, you then enter into the work term stream, and you would do a semester of school, semester of work, semester of school, and you did that for 6 more terms. So in my second year, during my final summer, which I would have considered off, I guess, before I moved into my co-op, I had been teaching tennis for a number of summers, and I was definitely looking for something different to do. And one of my tennis coaches was talking to my dad one time, and he was one of my old tennis coaches. So he was a senior manager at the firm Deloitte. And he mentioned to my dad that they were actually looking for some additional administrative help during the summer. And I was 18, again, looking for something to do. So I went for an interview, not really knowing what to expect. And, I got the job and I started immediately. So that summer, 18, right, I got to work in what I called a real world job. So I had a cubicle, I had a computer, I had, basically all the school supplies like that I love. I still love all that stuff to date, but, it was at 18, that was a really big deal for me, is to be really in that, adult work environment. I loved it. So, I didn't know much about Deloitte. I didn't even really know what they did, but I knew it was kind of accounting. I knew it was probably an area I wanted to look into. And for me, it was just getting my foot in the door. I knew if I could learn early, that it was definitely going to put me one step ahead of, in my career. So I worked in their bankruptcy department. So I was responsible for organizing all the filings they did, sorting all information that would come in. I'd record everything into the system that they had. And like I said, it was anything that they told me to do, I would do. So I look back on it, definitely didn't make that much money that summer, but I absolutely loved it. So in my second year, I kind of skipped the Deloitte slide, but that's okay. Upon returning to university that fall, I kept on with Deloitte on a part-time basis. Like I said, I was ecstatic to kind of, just be in the door. A little bit different than working my retail job. I actually still continued my retail job because, again, I got 50% clothing. So I basically funded my my closet by keeping that job. But getting my foot in the door early allowed me to then move into their audit department. And we can talk about audit a little bit more later, but into their audit department to complete my 3 work terms. And then eventually I got hired full-time by Deloitte when I graduated. So, making that decision at 18 was really important and essential for kind of my longer term career. And I probably didn't know that at 18, right? But going back to university for a second, in my second year of university, some of my friends got me involved in an organization called SIFE. So this is called Enactus now in university. It might be familiar, might not for anybody here on the call. But this was by far the best decision I had made in university. So things, like I said, things have changed slightly. The name has changed, and the focus of the organization has changed a little bit since I was in, because this is now, I'm an accountant that can't really do math in my head, 15 years ago. But at the time, we were a student-led volunteer organization. We put off various entrepreneurial initiatives to educate and increase financial literacy throughout the community. So, we helped young children, senior citizens learn about the importance of financial literacy. We supported local entrepreneurs in developing and setting up their businesses. And we even had a program that helped veterans return from war gain skills that they needed to get back into the working community. So I started as a volunteer as part of that organization and eventually became the president of it in my final year. So besides making a real difference in the community, I did meet amazing friends that I would have never met otherwise in university, especially ones that, were in different programs, different years. It was a global organization, so there were teams from universities all over the world, and therefore we had opportunities to, what you would do is you would present on your projects and your program that you did at these national and world competitions. And, I got to travel to New York, Singapore, and present at these, and Berlin was another example. We even won the global competition in 2008 in Singapore. So again, 15 years ago, so a few years ago now. But the idea is that, it was a great organization to get involved in university, added that additional element to university that, the studying just can't provide to you. And, as a, well-recognized organization in the university, we got to meet with top politicians, government officials, business executives in the city and nationally. A lot of them wanted to work with us, right? So I got to meet a lot of, great leaders at such an early age. And this isn't a plug to say get involved in this organization. But my takeaway is, it took me a couple years to get away from that, go to school, study, come home kind of routine, that you really are missing out if you don't grasp on some of those amazing opportunities in university. Like I said, I think I honestly took away more from being involved in this group than I did in my classes. Don't tell the profs that, but it definitely gave me those well-rounded skills that has helped me throughout my career. Another example of ways I got involved is I had an opportunity to be a part of business case study teams at 2 global competitions in Montreal and the UK, where we were given various cases. You had to present to business leaders on your views and suggestions of their company. So they give you kind of an issue and you had to resolve it. One of our cases was even a straight 24 hours. So that was very interesting to say the least, that experience. I definitely did not want to do that again, but it was a good one. This definitely got me outside of my comfort zone. This was not where I felt good, but the opportunity presented, I tried it out and I enjoyed it. And again, it got you an opportunity to travel, practice your presentation skills, and also got you exposed to those top business leaders again. So again, any step for me, it was just about introducing myself and getting involved in anything that could help me in my career. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do at that time, so I was kind of open to just getting involved. Kind of last thing about university, and the reason I'm plugging, I guess, the commerce program so much is because when you're in high school and junior high and you're trying to figure out where you want to go, obviously the undergrad that you pick is really important. From an accounting perspective, yes, you can do, and a finance perspective, you can do other undergraduate degrees and switch over, and yes, it's completely doable. But the commerce program definitely sets you up for your career in finance and accounting. Like I said, there's kind of prereqs that get recognized in some of the courses that you do in the commerce program, that then makes your journey to get your accountancy designation quicker than is if you took another stream. So, making that decision in grade 11 or 12 of what undergrad you want to focus in, if business is an area of interest for you, definitely signing up for the commerce program is the way to go. And kind of the chat today is about some of those, beyond university, I guess, courses, what the commerce program offers, right? So, I know every department will have their opportunities to have these extracurriculars, but the commerce program really does allow you to have a well-rounded university experience. So the other area, just quickly before I move on, is that I did take advantage in university to do one of my school terms at their campus in Harlow. So I hope this might be a familiar place with you, but Harlow is about an hour outside of London, and it is a Memorial University campus. So at the time, Bachelor of Commerce students got an opportunity in your fourth year. I can't remember. I graduated in 2009 and I went in 2008. So the year before you graduate, in that January semester, you got an opportunity to go. So all the students that were there at the time were commerce students with you. So this is my first time ever living away from home. I traveled with 20 of my closest classmates, which you can see in the photos. The weekdays were packed with classes and studying, because what you do is you cram everything you could, from Tuesday to Friday or whatever it was, because on the weekends we were gone to the airport. So we would spend weekends in London. We spent Paddy's Day in Ireland, in Dublin. I went to Paris, Disney. We did a half-term cruise in the Mediterranean and another stint in Barcelona, just to name a few. So at a really young age, it was a fantastic opportunity to move away from home, get exposure to all these wonderful places in Europe, and at the same time still have that supportive memorial. So it wasn't, a complete exchange, which was probably a little bit more outside my comfort zone. I had friends that did that as well, that, really, really loved it. But for me, I love the idea that I was still there with my friends. Your profs were familiar to you, and you had that support network of, that connection to home, which I loved. I don't think I'd be able to handle it now. That travel now sounds exhausting, but it was definitely fun in my early 20s. As I mentioned, once I graduated, I went on to start full-time at Deloitte. And at the same time, essentially, as soon as you graduate, that September, or that summer actually, I started the Chartered Accountancy Program. So as I mentioned before, they have changed their name from Chartered Accountant to Chartered Professional Accountant. And that is because, so a Chartered Accountancy designation was typically very financial, and I'll get into again, kind of audits, really numbers-based accounting designation. And then there was also a designation called Certified Managerial Accounting. I think it was certified. It's CMA, so Certified Managerial Accounting. And that was more kind of your strategic, project, cost management, forecasting, like business talk about, future forecasts, all that kind of stuff. That was more the CMA. And then we also had a Certified General Accountancy designation, which was people that didn't want to invest all the time into the other programs, but still wanted to have further in-depth knowledge of accounting. That was called a Certified General Accountant. The three of those merged. I can't remember the exact year. My guess is around like 2010, 2011. No, it would have been 2015. I can see it now. So 2015, they merged. So now in Canada, we have the one recognized designation called the Certified Professional Accountancy. So, I don't know the full depths of how it works now because I went through a different program, but the same idea in terms of the way you study, et cetera, and the exam at the end is similar. So if anyone has any questions on it, I can certainly answer what I can. But the idea is, you start your full-time job in September, and at the same time you enter this program. And those 2 years are hard. I can remember someone told me that you have, I forget what it was, 3 things you had to balance. So you have to balance your work, you had to balance your study, and you had to balance your friends or social life, I guess. I was told that, on any good given day, you can really only do two of the things well. So, you're going to burn out if you try to do everything well every day. So, I would wake up, I'd make the decision, okay, today's a study day, it's a work day. And work usually, work has to happen. But, some days I would purposely be like, I'm not studying today. I'm going and I'm visiting my friends. I'm hanging out with my friends, or I'm doing something for me. And, that's the way I got through those couple years. It was definitely manageable. You have a great support network, and that still holds true for the current CPA program. You're not the only one going through it. So when I was part of the firm, I had a number of colleagues, and you had a number of previous colleagues that went through it, and then current friends, and there was a complete network to help you get through it. But it is hard. You're working, your typical 9 to 5-ish days. You had your demands, you had your deadlines at work, and then you studied, in the evenings and on the weekends. But it was hard, but honestly, it is one of the best, it is the best, decision I have made from my career perspective. And it was the biggest exams I would ever write. So I can remember the day I passed is on the left-hand side there, and then the right is my convocation. But that was by far one of the top 5 days of my life. So I think about it, I got married and I had 2 kids. So, for me, it literally was within that same, realm of accomplishments. It was one of those things that you work so hard for that when you actually accomplish and finish it, it was so rewarding. But I chose to do a chartered accountancy designation for a few reasons. So one, as I mentioned before, my skill set, it was very evident to me going through school, like I said, what I was good at. I was good at numbers. I liked analyzing. I liked solving problems, like analytical problems. And this profession was really suited towards that skill set. And I still didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, long term in terms of my career, but everyone kept, drilling into me that getting your CA or now your CPA is the best grounding block that you can get. So when doing my research of what I wanted to do, I looked at, who are the top execs, who are the top chief financial officers, who are, the people that I looked up to. And almost all of them had CAs or CPAs. So for me, I was like, you know what? I don't need to stay at Deloitte my whole life. I don't even know what I want to do. But if I can get this, then at least the doors are wider as I progress through my career. I'm now a hiring manager. So, I have a team under me, and I've recently hired a couple people. And when I'm going through the resumes, having a CA now, or CPA, sorry, makes you stand out above all the other candidates. So again, it was that building block for me that was essential for my career. And we can talk about it a little bit later, but I work at Newfoundland Power now, and there's CAs or CPAs planted everywhere. Our CFO is a CPA, our director of finance and many of his team. I'm an audit, someone in our regulatory department, someone in customer service is a CPA. Like it because you do a CPA as well, it doesn't mean you have to work in accounting. There's, it provides you kind of that wider skill set that really you're adaptable in any part of an organization. So after I completed my CA in 2010, it wasn't long after that I knew I wanted a change. So one of the greatest things about working for the company Deloitte was that it was global and it supported gaining opportunities across other offices. So I applied for a job in the Deloitte firm in Bermuda. Sounds glamorous, and it was for a little while. So I moved there in September 2011. I only knew one person down there. So this really was, me just saying, I want something new. And I just put my name out there and I went. The one great thing about working in a tax haven island, there's a couple of these, Bermuda and Cayman Islands would be the two main ones from an accounting perspective, was that, most people that traveled there were in the same shoes as me. So there were 18 people that started the same day as me at Deloitte alone, let alone the other firms there, and let alone people kind of the years before me. From my team that same day, there's people from the US, Canada, Brazil, the UK, South Africa. Those people came my family. One of them eventually became my husband. But life there was how you thought it might be. So I traveled on that scooter in the top right on a daily basis in the rain or shine. I can't say snow because it definitely didn't snow there. I worked very hard during the days. It still was that firm, and you still were, it was still a progressive move in terms of my career, in terms of learning new skills. It was a completely different accounting standard. I was working off US-based companies versus Canadian-based. And if you know anything about accounting, they work under, at the time, different standards. So there was a huge learning curve from my perspective from a career, but also you got that fun side of it, right? So, you'd work hard in the days, but then at night, we would be on the beach. I'd play volleyball, tennis. We do barbecues every night. And then there was a lot of travel too. So we're very close to the East Coast of the US. So, weekend trips in various places. I was also on some of my audit clients were in the UK, New York City. So I did spend a lot of time on and off the island, which again, I was in my kind of mid-20s. It was a really, wonderful experience to kind of be able to see the world, yet at the same time, develop my career. So 2 years later, myself and my now husband, who's in this photo, decided to move away from Bermuda and move to a place called Bristol, England. Again, because I was working for Deloitte, I was able to seamlessly get a transfer to their office in that city. Bristol, which I don't know if people are familiar, but that is the city where John Cabot set sail when he discovered Newfoundland in 1497. And they have a Matthew there, similar to the Matthew in Bonavista. So that was a kind of a neat connection to home, which I loved. But the reason we chose Bristol was because it was halfway between London, which I love, it's one of my favorite cities in the world, and Swansea, Wales, which is where many people probably don't know where it is, but that is where my husband is from. So it was nice kind of halfway to be close to his family, yet Bristol was a large city in England, so had all the main kind of economic hub for jobs and clients, etc. So like I said, I worked there for Deloitte again. At that time, I got promoted up to a manager level. So again, new country, new standards. So a lot of learning, progressiveness, but again, able to, create a life in the UK, which was different for me for a girl from Newfoundland. And it was busy. The UK is fast paced. So not exactly what I was used to coming from St. John's or Bermuda. Like for the first 6 months, they said, you're on a client in London. And like I said, it was 2 hours away. So I would get up early on a Monday morning. I'd get on a train. I'd stay in London Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night. I'd be on a train back to our house on a Friday. So, very glamorous, obviously a couple of weeks. Got tiring after a while, but looking back again, it was a great learning experience. And I got to this day, London is still my favorite city. So I got to spend a lot of time in a city that I loved. I also, again, got to travel with some clients. So I got to go to a warm island off the coast of the UK called Jersey. And I got to travel to New York City, right? So, and Scotland. So there was various places you got to go to, which provide those opportunities. We spent 4 years in the UK. From a personal perspective, a lot happened while we were in the UK. We bought some property. So we bought an apartment or a flat, they call it. We got engaged, and then I eventually got married to John. So, we really expanded, I guess, from a personal side and from a career perspective in the UK. We bought a flat, so, we had anticipated to stay there for a while. But I'm a Newfoundlander, and after 6 years, I really started to miss home. My first niece was born, and I really started to miss home. We talked about moving home, but never really serious. You know, for my husband, we would have to apply for permanent residency. There was a lot of kind of administrative stuff that would have happened if to move home. So, you know, it wasn't completely on the radar, but, you know, we talked about it, knowing that eventually we might. And what happened is when I was home for our wedding one summer, I connected with some old colleagues that I had at Deloitte, and one of them worked at Fortis Inc. And they talked about kind of the way the company was going, and what was happening was Fortis was becoming a publicly listed company on the New York Stock Exchange. That's a big deal for a Newfoundland company, but with that there's a lot of skill set that the company needs, because Newfoundland doesn't typically have these types of companies. And as I mentioned, when I was in Bermuda and in the UK, I developed all these skills for these other areas, and a lot of that was US listed companies. A job opportunity came up at Fortis Inc. that was literally meant to be for me. It was exactly what I was doing in the UK for a US listed company in the UK, and it was for a company at home. I talked to my husband about it, and we decided to jump on that opportunity, and I moved home to Newfoundland. He eventually moved home a few months later. Like I said, it wasn't that the timing I expected, but you know, my message would be that when those opportunities happen, you have to jump on it. For me, like I said, I developed such a niche experience when I lived away that this probably would never have come up again. So if I didn't jump on it then, when I look to move home in a couple of years, I probably wouldn't have had such a great opportunity to come home to. And I loved working for Fortis. So I worked there for a couple of years. I helped them to become what's called SOX compliant. That's a very common word now and not SOX like SOCKS. It's SOX called SOX. So that is called Sarbanes-Oxley. It's a standard that all US companies have to be. So what it means is that companies that are listed on the US Stock Exchange have to have certain controls in place to ensure that their financial statements and what they're reporting out to the public are accurate. So without getting too much detail, they came into play when, I don't know if the company Enron rings a bell to anybody, but there was a lot of fraudulent stuff that happened with that company. I don't even know all the ins and outs of the detail, but when that whole situation happened, the US put in regulations to ensure that companies were put in various places. So put in various controls to make sure that, you know, what the public was seeing as their financial information was accurate. You know, as simple as people reviewing different reports. You know, someone does a calculation, another person reviews it. That's very simple terms, but that's the idea that, you know, there's kind of checks and double checks of everything to ensure that things are accurate. So I became a specialist in that area. So I helped Fortis and its subsidiaries become what we call SOX compliant. And then worked there for a couple of years. I went off on maternity on my firstborn, Tessa. And after I came back from maternity from her, another opportunity got presented to myself to work in my current role as the Senior Manager of Internal Audit at Newfoundland Power. So the individual that was in my role previously retired. And like I said, these opportunities don't come often, right? So, you know, a lot of people stay at Newfoundland Power for years and years. So to come to this company, you really have to jump on when these movements happen, when people retire. It wasn't the timing I had planned. I just got back from maternity. I really loved working at Fortis. So I actually did hesitate for a little bit. But after talking to some people that worked here and to some of my mentors, it was definitely a great opportunity to come to. And I've loved it ever since. So I've been here 3.5 years. And I thought I'd take a second to give an overview of what I do. The pictures on the screen definitely mask what I do, because this is where I say accountants have fun. I jump on any opportunity to do tours. So when I worked for Fortis, the parent company, I got to travel to a lot of the subsidiaries. You know, there's subsidiaries all around Canada and the US and the Caribbean. And they'd always say, would you like a tour of our operations? I'd be like, yeah, because for me as an accountant, you typically are more behind a desk than you would be. So for me, kind of putting on a hard hat and getting out was definitely something that was new, but really interested me. And I'll get into a little bit, but having knowledge of the operations of the company is now essential for my role now. So like I said, I'll just describe a little bit about what I do. So I'm not sure how familiar you guys would be with the term audit. However, when I was at Deloitte, for example, we were often called external auditors. So many companies, most companies actually that you probably are not even aware of, are required by law or a financial institution like a bank. So if a company has a loan at a bank, they would be required to have an external audit completed. So in that case, what would happen is when I worked at Deloitte, I would be assigned a client. We would go in, we would look at their financial statements, and we would perform, simplified version here, but we would perform various tests to make sure that the numbers that the company was saying in their financial statements was accurate, right? So if a bank is relying on you to be able to pay their loan on a regular basis, they want to make sure that you have the sufficient money to do that. So that's where we would have to validate that, what we're telling the bank was correct. So that is external audit. Like I said, worked there for a number of years. You get a lot of great exposure to different companies, different industries, because, at Deloitte, you didn't just focus on one industry. You could do a non-for-profit. I did, a satellite company. I do a utility. It varied. So you got a lot of great exposure there. But it wasn't where I wanted to be long-term. So, I worked at a lot of different clients. I never, ever felt like I had a home. So coming to Fortis and Newfoundland Power allowed me to use my skill set, but internally. And now I work in a department called internal audit. So what my team is we are independent of kind of the rest of the operations. I report separately to a committee from our board, the Audit and Risk Committee. So I report directly to them, not to, say, management. Of course, we work with them, but the whole idea is that we're supposed to remain relatively independent. And what we do is we perform various types of audits on the company's operations and processes. And the aim of that is to add value by, when we review a process, we look to identify any issues that could be going on in that process, but also to identify efficiencies. So if we find something that could improve the way the operation works, then we flag that as well. So in external audit, you mainly focus on like finance and numbers. And although we do that in internal audit, our role is definitely wider reaching. So when I say here that I really need to understand the operations, the reason is because we could have audits in human resource, we could have IT audits, we could have audits around engineering and some of the projects that we do, or our operations, right? So from my perspective, it allows me to have my kind of audit analytic skills and finance, but be able to expand it across the entire organization, which I love. So to give examples, like if we're implementing a new IT system in our company, my team will go in and we'll review to make sure that the system was implemented correctly, and that the system is performing and doing what it was supposed to do. So we also perform controls. Every year there are changes in your customer. I say it's probably not you guys getting the bills necessarily, but maybe your parents. But every year we make updates to our rates of what we give to our customers for billing. So my team will go in, we'll make sure that those rates have been updated in a system, and we'll do various tests to make sure that the customers are getting the bills that the amount on their bills that they're supposed to get, as an example. My team is currently looking at a review of all the diversity and inclusion initiatives that Newfoundland Power is offering. And we're comparing that to best practice across utilities and other companies to make sure that we're aligned and identifying any potential opportunities there that we could improve it. Last year, I did an audit on how our company is tackling climate change and making sure that our infrastructure is prepared to stand up for any potential climate change impacts in the future. So that's just to give an example. I know it sounds a bit high level, but it gives an example of kind of areas that we look into. It's not just the numbers, which again, like I said, excites me. Personally, I do like to continue my education. So I did my CA in 2010, but not last year, 2021, I decided to do my certified internal auditor. So as part of doing your CPA, you definitely do get some exposure to internal audit. And like I said, a lot of the skills I learned in CPA were relevant anyway. But this especially with me heading up this department at Newfoundland Power, it was important for me to, be that expert in this field. So I went on and I did my certification 2 years ago. And like I said, it just gave me more focused skills, specifically in the area that I work with on a daily basis. There's lots of opportunities that I can now go on to specialize, whether it's in IT or risk. And I probably will look to eventually to do that as the years go on. But like I said, I have a 4 and a 2-year-old. So there they are. And essentially for the next little while, it will be keeping them alive because that's a hard enough job in itself. But, so that's, I guess, from my perspective, is that high level. Look at where I've gotten to today. I don't know if I blabbed or not, but I'm definitely open to taking any questions that you guys have. I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, MaryBeth. No, that was amazing. And we chatted before the session. It's amazing to see that you've had such a journey and be able to travel professionally, personally. Just on that one of the last slides you shared with us for all the students watching. Your gamification code is super relevant. I love it that we ended on that. Is going to be internal auditor. So you guys can take internal auditor and put that in for your gamification points in the clubhouse. So internal auditor. Yeah, it's amazing. If any students watching have any questions, feel free to put them in the Zoom chat or in the clubhouse chat, and we can definitely forward them on to MaryBeth. I had a couple questions that came up throughout that I feel like, as someone who admittedly, I've been working on my own financial literacy because it hasn't been super great. I'm very much so the reading as many novels as possible and avoiding the math situation. So you and I would have been, kind of on opposite angles in high school, but I get it. I wonder when it comes to, I had heard you mention a couple extracurriculars and organizations you took part in MUN, and then also after the fact. And I wonder, a lot of our students, a lot of our youth who come to us really want to go into a career that allows them to create change, work with vulnerable populations, those kinds of things. So obviously from the sounds of it, that's very much so a possibility when you work in the world of finance. When you do something like be a CPA or a CIA, it is obviously something to be able to work for a cause.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you think about, from a lot of wonderful non-for-profit organizations are essentially businesses in their own right. So, from a finance perspective, all those organizations need controllers and need financial expertise, right, to make sure that that operation is run efficiently and effectively, right? Especially in non-for-profits. Being financially sound is essential to make sure that all the money spent is going to the right cause. So a lot of my counterparts work in those areas, right? So, you can work for, that's, like I said, for me, it was all about that grounding block as a CA or a CPA. The world's your oyster in terms of you could work for these, big national multi-global companies, or you could work for, a really sound non-for-profit that means a lot to you. Again, same skill set, it's just where you apply it, provides, I guess, that opportunity. Also, a lot of boards, a lot of my colleagues are treasurers or are part of boards for non-for-profits. So again, maybe your role as your job is not necessarily maybe where exactly you might want it to be, but a lot of your volunteer initiatives need that skill set. So again, a lot of boards need people to be able to support them in terms of their making sure that their, again, financials are, sound, et cetera. So, when I first came out, I was the treasurer for the Duke of Edinburgh's Association. So, I was responsible for doing all the accounting on a volunteer basis for that organization. And I would work with, the auditors and the head office and all that kind of stuff. So again, using my skill set for an organization that I was quite connected to because I was a gold award recipient for that organization. So endless opportunities to apply your skills to however you want to do it.
Amazing. And I know you also touched a little bit on when we were chatting about it, but it definitely sounds like there is a possibility to be able to really work anywhere in the world. So if students wanted to go to school away and come back to Newfoundland, or go to school here and then go away somewhere else in Canada or in the world, it seems like it's very flexible. Obviously, like you said, different regulations in different parts of the world, but it seems like it's very flexible for someone to be able to say, jump over to Japan and work there versus jump to Mexico versus wherever.
Yeah, so, there's various professions, and I'm not an expert in other
Mhm.
professions, but, there's various professions that when you get your specialism, you are restricted to that jurisdiction. Um, the CPA is, and we talked about it earlier, but the CPA is a very widely globally recognized designation. So, me applying for the job in Bermuda or the job in the UK, or the US or wherever you wanted to apply, it is recognized, right? It's not that I would have had to have the exact designation in the UK. I didn't even have to do any additional education or exams in those countries to be able to work there. It was, pretty seamlessly transfers across. My husband, like I said, he was born in the UK. He has his designation from the UK. He's able to work in Canada now too. So they are definitely all those kind of sister designations across the world are definitely seen similar. And yeah, it just provides endless. And then, I don't know where the world is going from a remote side, but, accounting definitely allows a lot of flexibility from that perspective. We've learned a lot in the last couple of years about how we work. And a lot of us do work remotely. Newfoundland Power offers 2 days remote, 3 days in the office currently. But there's a lot of jobs I've seen out there too that allow you to do that remote. One of my colleagues that used to live, that when I lived in the UK, she spent a month in France while she worked for the old office I did in the UK because you could. So, from that perspective, yeah, it is really, really kind of open-ended.
Amazing. And my last question, what advice would you have for any youth, especially like young women or young Two-Spirit LGBTQI plus youth who are interested in pursuing this kind of field, who want to look at something like this for a career?
So for me, it would be, we kind of talked about it, jump on opportunities when they present themselves. Don't hold back if, it's not the right time or, things like that. Cause you gotta take those on when you find them or when you get them. But for me, it was about just trying to learn as much as I could about it. So I had mentioned that, the way I got my foot in the door is because my dad was randomly talking to my old tennis coach. And then I was like, what's that? And then I started to look into it and I was like, wow, that actually kind of sounds interesting. So finding people that are in those careers and just talking to them early, and making those, because it is important sometimes if you know the path that you want to go down, sometimes you don't realize the decisions you have to make. Like some of my friends in university didn't realize that they had to enter, a certain program if they want to do accounting. And then all of a sudden they're 1 or 2 years behind, which at the end of the day was no big deal. But, if it was something that you were looking to fast track more, it was kind of, it was nice to have that information early. So for me, it would be just, talking to different mentors or people in the community that have roles that you think are inspiring and just, see what decisions they made. And then, yeah, jump on those opportunities early. And there are, there's various, and I guess just also stick to your gut, right? So I was always wanted to be this straight A student and, I was, but I learned that I was like, I don't love English and my sister did, and I had an older sister. So I thought I had to do what she did, and she did all the drama and all, she's a physio now, right? She did all the medical side of things. And I was like, I don't love that. And I quickly learned that it was okay, right? That I didn't have to love it all. I didn't have to be perfect at that subject. But then I knew where I did love. So then that's, like I said, that's where I spent all my time. People thought I was crazy doing electives in math, but I was like, I actually love it. So that's where I wanted to do my electives. I'd rather do that than do an extra, course that I had to read a bunch of textbooks. That sounded really boring to me. So, be passionate about where you are and, just keep in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us a lot of amazing information. It's so brilliant to be able to see a role model who's traveled all over the world and then decided to come back to Newfoundland and kind of settle back into your roots. I think that's super inspiring. And thank you so much for sharing your story.
No problem. And, I can remember some of the people that I looked up to when I was in high school and university. So if anybody wants, you guys can provide my direct contact. If anyone is interested, I don't mind reaching out and answering, I guess, any questions that people have.
Amazing. Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much. I hope you go and stay cozy and warm from this snowstorm.
I think I have to go shovel up my car.
Okay. Take care, MaryBeth.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Bye. See you, everyone.